You're listening to the Rite Retirement Show.
The 70% of people out there listening to the show today are going to need some level of care. It doesn't necessarily mean that 70% are going to end up in a nursing home, but 70% of people will need some assistance out there. The biggest fear is running out of money for the retiree, but what we see is not enough people spend enough of their money.
Cris prides himself in what matters to you. This is the Rite Retirement Show.
Hi there. Welcome to the Rite Retirement Show. I am Luann Fulmer, joined by two amazing and experienced advisors from WG Financial Group, President Cris Wallace and Graham Bauer. And they are here again today to help you plan smarter and retire stronger. If you have questions, just give them a call. You can also text the word visit to 256-937-2010, and you can get a complimentary discovery session. You can follow us on Facebook throughout the week, WG Financial Group 256. Plus, catch us anytime, actually, on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Just look for the Rite Retirement Show. And hello to you, Cris and Graham.
Hello to you, Luann. I have to say thanks for calling us amazing.
You are.
You said two amazing advisors.
Amazing.
I know. You're always hyping us up at the beginning. We appreciate it, Luann.
I mean it. And you're experienced as well. So how about that?
Everybody needs a hype man, and you're just our hype woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm telling the truth, though, honestly. So, yeah.
I know. It's like we're running out of the tunnel at the beginning of a football game or something, breaking through the banner.
Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly. The big game.
Yeah. Speaking of, did you see where University of Michigan won last night?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't get to watch the game because I don't pay for cable television. And the annoying thing with college sports is it's all on cable television pretty much. But I watched the highlights afterwards, and yeah, it looked like a good game. It's always fun. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, but any of these types of events, whether it's championships of whatever kind, are always just a fun way to kind of break up the year.
I know.
Yeah, I saw a stat this morning that the University of Michigan had 0 starters who were enrolled at Michigan as a freshman.
Okay.
The starting lineup had an average age of 22.
Wow.
And they even had a starter that was 25 years old.
Oh, my gosh.
And so I had a conversation with a friend of mine on the way home last night. I do have friends, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah. Okay. A
For
friend.
those of you wondering, I have a couple. At least I call them friends. I don't know what they call me.
Right.
But anyway, I told him that I think the transfer portal and this NIL has just kind of really ruined college sports in a way. It's made it like NFL/NBA light in a way. So I'm not a big fan of it, honestly. But hey, that's just my opinion. It doesn't really matter. So we can talk about some financial
Chris,
stuff.
my husband feels the same way. And of course, we're huge, University of Kansas Jayhawk fans. And he just has hardly watched any of it this year, where we used to watch it every Tuesday, whenever the next, Tuesday, Saturday, whatever. We hardly have watched any of it because he's just disinterested. It's so disheartening as to what they're doing with it. So it's good. The president kind of got involved in it. I thought that was kind of funny,
Yeah, it was. I was kind of surprised to see that, but
I think there's some bigger fish to fry.
I think
at the
so,
moment.
but whatever.
That probably
that's
take
kinda what I was
priority
thinking.
before the NIL. But it's one of those things, I think, where if you are a Michigan fan, you're probably loving the NIL.
Yeah. I mean, a win is a win. That's pretty cool. So congratulations to them. Yeah.
a dub is a dub.
So, guys, do you have any real talk for us today?
We don't. We didn't
Okay.
come up with a reel this
Okay.
week. I just my feed is filled with like Social Security, claiming stuff, and we've beat that drum to death. And why it's not. I actually recorded a YouTube video yesterday, our first one for our channel.
Oh, good.
And it is on Social Security claiming, and so it's a lot of the things that we talk about. But we're going to start posting some videos on YouTube, so that'll be kind of fun. Got to do that every week now.
We're
going to add to the.
We're gonna
maybe someone will have us on theirs.
Yeah,
at
somebody's
some point.
going to do a real talk about us. Look at that real old guy doing YouTube.
That's so funny. Maybe so.
Yeah.
I love
Hopefully
that.
not. Yeah.
Okay.
And as far as market update, we'll just talk just a quick blurb on that for a second. It's just kind of been trending kind of sideways, a little up, a little down, and it really depends on what President Trump says that what's going to happen in Iran as to how the market tends to react. So right now it's reacting on emotion, and it's kind of a wait and see moment, I think. And You just have to wonder at what point do we finish whatever we're trying to do in Iran? Because again, there's things we don't know, and I'll be okay with it saying that. But at some point, we got to get out of there, and I think that's what investors are waiting to see is like when are we going to get out? When are we done with whatever we're doing over there, so that the market can get on with business, because it's just kind of bouncing up and down. And we've had a lot of questions about Roth converting internally. Can we Roth convert? And it's like, we're only about 6% down. And if boots hit the ground, we're going to go double digits down. So we just don't feel like, one, you're not ever really supposed to time the market anyway. But we definitely feel like right now trying to time a Roth conversion with what's happening overseas is probably not smart right now. If the market were down 15%, I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I think we talked about it last weekend. And it kind of goes for the same principle for if you have some cash that you've been sitting on that you've just been waiting for the right moment. Or, I talked to somebody last week who federal employee, and they had their TSP mostly in G fund, and they were like, oh, I'm waiting for the dip. And, when that happens, so I'm probably going to be sometime soon. So in those scenarios too, it's kind of the same deal as a conversion. I wouldn't feel confident telling anyone today that, yeah, you're going to be catching the dip if you're doing that. Because, you might, but the upside is not nearly as high, and the downside is still definitely there. And I think that's the bigger thing, like we talked about before last year when there was the whole breakout with the tariffs. You saw, I believe it was about a 20% or close to 20 at the high. Yeah. So when you're going 20% off the high, the likelihood that you go another 20% off is pretty low at that point, historically speaking. But if you're 5 or 6% off the high, there's no guarantee either way, but you're really playing with more fire there because there's a lot more downward mobility that's yet to happen. And if you see an upswing, it's likely to not be as large as it would be if, like we saw last year, when you're down 20, the upswing is going to be a lot larger. So I think the biggest factor is the risk reward factor. And right now, I don't think that's really in your favor. Now, to be clear, and I think we again said this last week, but that's not telling people to be scared and not invest their money right now and keep waiting to invest. You're going to do better just staying invested, being invested, not trying to time it. But for the people who are in those scenarios, like they're converting or they've been sitting on some cash, if you're putting money in now because you're just sure that this is going to be the right moment to catch an upswing, that's where I would say that, your risk reward timing might be a little bit off.
Yeah. More room on the bottom at this point.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, good. That's interesting. How about anything regarding the federal minute? Anything there?
There was one thing that came out this week, I'll just mention this, that as of today, there has been no proposal for any increase in pay for the federal government next year. So right now, I think there's about a 7% increase in military pay that's been proposed, and nothing on the federal employment side. And there's also now been some proposals for around a 10% cut in certain agencies. So we're starting to see a little bit, again, of some of the similar traction that we saw last year. Obviously, last year there was a really big exodus between the two, DRPs that were offered, and then also some of the rifts that happened. And then it sort of seemed to mellow out a little bit in the last 6 months or so. But we are starting to see that pick up a little bit. And I think we'll see that even more as, the famous annual budget comes out, right, sometime around July or August, in that timeline when we tend to see those government shutdowns. So I think, again, it's just a reminder for federal employees that this is a more uncertain time. And I think if you're someone especially close to retirement, it's a really good time to be thinking about, how much longer am I going to do this? If my time comes to an end before I was expecting it to here, do I have the ability to retire? How do I pivot into something else? What do I do with my benefits at that point?
Know your numbers.
Exactly. Know your numbers is huge, because if you are expecting, for example, I talked to somebody, a federal employee, a few weeks ago, and they work in an agency that right now it's pretty up in the air if their job will even exist in 2 to 3 months. They're planning on working until 62, and they're, I think, 56, 57 years old. So for them, 57, they'd be eligible to retire based on their years of service, but they were planning on staying till 62. And that's a big difference in your pension. That's a big difference in the amount of savings for your TSP. Not saying that maybe they can't stop now, but it's just a good reminder that in their case, they really want to know their numbers and kind of get some verification on what happens if the worst case scenario does occur. And we just really don't know at this point. So I think it's just a good time to be planning, be thinking about your future, because there is just some uncertainty there sort of building up again.
If you're just joining us, we thank you so much for joining us. This is the Rite Retirement Show with Cris Wallace and Graham Bauer of WG Financial Group. And last week, we talked about income in retirement. So pension, Social Security, our savings. But there's another side of retirement planning that people tend to avoid entirely or maybe just wait too long to deal with. And that's protecting what they've built. So we're talking, long-term care, life insurance. These are the conversations that I think feel uncomfortable, because it's talking about maybe end of life. So they get kind of pushed off. And then pushing them off is very expensive. So let's get to it. My first question, Cris, is do people actually need life insurance in retirement?
Yeah, I think this is a fairly common question. I think just in general, it's a depends answer. It's very situational. You got people that like life insurance. Maybe they've lost a loved one or their husband passed away, and maybe some money was left to them. So they value it differently than someone who is really following the rules of paying off all your debt, becoming kind of self-insured where you technically don't need life insurance. And then I have some families that just want to leave a legacy. So they'll do what's called a joint policy on, themselves, the parents, and they'll leave it for the kids. And there's benefits to that. So a couple of things, I'll just kind of walk through a few scenarios here. Number one, I think when you're younger, you absolutely have to have strong term life insurance. There is no reason not to have it. And people say, well, I can't afford it. You can't afford not to have it. And your spouse can't afford for you not to have it as well.
And it's not expensive.
No,
by the way,
not.
When you're young,
It's super
especially.
cheap.
I mean, I think my policy at $500,000 for 35 years is like $25 a month.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's super, super cheap.
Right.
And getting your own policy, we feel like is really, really important. So when I say your own policy, I do not mean at your job. Number one, your job can leave you or you can leave your job. And if that happens, you don't have life insurance. And maybe you're 10 years into your job at that point and they lay you off and you don't have the life insurance. And now you're in a laid off position with no job and also no life insurance if something happens. So your family is exposed. So we're big advocates of no matter how young you are, if you have a family, getting your own term life policy on the outside and paying for that, because when you own the policy, it goes wherever you go and you don't have to worry about your job at that point. The second thing about a job is usually it's not enough, because when you're younger, you have to protect for, sometimes multiple kids. You have to protect for college. You have to protect for income for the spouse in case he or she needs that. So it's not enough in a lot of cases. And so we just are big advocates of you picking up term life insurance on the outside. In retirement, we do occasionally run into people that still need it. And that's one of the things that we do in our planning process is this really make an assessment of the life insurance needs. So we basically, to put it bluntly, we just have one of the spouses in the plan pass away early as a test and show what that does to the asset level over time. Don't forget when, one passes away, barring a remarriage, you're going to be in the single filer tax bracket. So sometimes in retirement, I've seen people that need it longer than others. And sometimes, I've seen it where they didn't need any. Sometimes it's a 10-year term policy to cover a risk for a period of time. And I think we can all agree on something here. Like just listening to the show, I can probably just like point out in the audience. Of course, I can't see anybody, but I can probably point out 10 or 15 people, and they are likely to have known somebody who's passed away before their time, or they've passed away and they didn't have the appropriate coverage. So it's really important that you really make a unbiased assessment of life insurance, or have someone do that for you, because we tend to, have beliefs and biases, and there's a lot of people that are very biased against life insurance, and and we are too. If you don't need it, like if you don't need it, you don't need it. But if you need it, we're going to tell you need it. So The other thing that I will talk about just here as we kind of get on with the questions here, I had mentioned the second to die life insurance policy. So I have a few clients that have one of these in place. And what they're in place for is to give the kids money later on. And their plan is they are not doing a whole lot of Roth conversions. They actually thought it was cheaper, and it is, frankly, if you look at the numbers, it's cheaper for them to buy a second to die life insurance policy that when they die, the kids inherit the tax-free money from the life insurance, and then the kids can convert they can basically pay the tax, not convert. They can pay the tax on the inherited life insurance, and that way the parents aren't Roth converting where they're assuming the tax liability to pass on the Roth money to the kids. They thought it was just cheaper. And again, it was cheaper to just buy an annual life insurance policy, pay for it. The kids will get it and they'll pay the taxes, on that, on the IRAs when they inherit them. So again, everybody's situation and beliefs are different. I think at the end of the day, like we said, life insurance is a tool. And I think it's just important to understand that anytime you use a tool, whether that's fixing something in the garage or the house or the car, that you understand what the tool is really being used for.
One thing I'll just add to that is something that I hear from people that I think is really just a misunderstanding of why you use life insurance. And I'll start with term because I think that's probably the best example of this, is people saying something along the lines of, oh, if I pay $40 a month for the next 20 years on this policy and I don't die, oh man, I just paid in thousands of dollars into that and I got nothing out of it. And again, I think that is such just a fundamental misunderstanding of why you have a policy like that in place. Mm-hmm. Because, for example, I'll take my parents, for example. My whole life that I've been alive, my parents have never gotten in a car crash, never had any claim on their car insurance policy that I can remember and been aware of. I wouldn't say that carrying car insurance has been a waste of money for that whole time, and they would have just been better off to not do it because you just don't know what's going to happen. And I think sometimes with insurance, because, what we talk about occasionally with the people who sell the complicated whole and universal and indexed, all that fancy stuff, they make it seem like insurance primary purpose is to make you rich. And
yeah,
sure, that's a tool that some people might use. We don't really do that. But in our opinion, especially if you're talking like just a strict term policy or a second to die policy, something like that, that's not designed to make you rich or make your kids rich. It's designed to really cover a risk or meet a goal. Mm-hmm. So it has a purpose. So for example, a term life policy, if you're paying $40 a month for 20 years on that, yeah, you paid in thousands of dollars over time. But also during that time, if you had passed away, you're protecting your wife, you're protecting potentially your kids, and you're not going to feel like it was a waste of money if you needed to use it. So I think just with the environment around the insurance industry, sometimes people look at policies, especially temporary policies, just all wrong. And it's no fun to pay money for any type of insurance. I wish I didn't have to pay, car insurance, homeowners insurance, life insurance. I would rather just keep that money in my pocket. But when you actually need it, you're very glad that you have it. So I know that that's super obvious. And a lot of people listening might be like, yeah, everybody knows that. But day in and day out, it's so common to hear, I don't know if I want to spend $50 a month on that because I'm pretty healthy right now. And, the risk is low. So I just don't know if that's worth it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, number one, I agree with everything you said there, Graham. First of all, it's just to cover risk in the case we're describing it here. And it's better to have it and don't need it than to need it, don't have it. Kind of thing.
Can you imagine? What a mess.
Oh, I've seen it happen to my uncle.
Oh.
And so my aunt's grieving and they don't even have the money to put him in the ground. And I remember they had to kind of almost like, this is before GoFundMe,
right,
but like GoFundMe the money, raise it to be able to bury him. So I think it's not I think you have to do a fair assessment. I want to go back to the second to die policy for a second. One of the things, again, that the family that I'm referring to here that used this second to die policy to make sure they left money to the kids, there were two things. Number one, they wanted to know they could spend all of their assets and there would still be money left. And if there were IRA money left, they would use the money from the life insurance policy to pay the tax on the IRA. That was number one. The other thing was their kids are good, like today. Like the kids are engineers and they're good today. But one of the things that they were a little bit concerned with is the evolution of AI at this point. And we know that AI will impact certain jobs. I don't think that we understand how big and big and bad it's going to be, or big and scary it's going to be at the end of the day. But we do know that certain, especially in the engineering field, AI is definitely going to be a help in that area, and it may eliminate jobs. So while the kids are good today, they didn't know if they were going to be good in the future. And so they wanted to make sure that even though they're good today and they have some assets, they wanted to make sure they left some additional assets to them. And I think that was another, a deciding factor when they made the choice there. So, what's good today may not be good tomorrow. And I don't think that anybody, including myself, can say, well, my kids are good today, they're always going to be good. We truly don't know that. And what they did was they put an extra ring of protection, if you will, in place for like life insurance. So again, it's all situational. It's all about how you view it. Some people are against it. And listen, we're not for or against it. We are for the family that comes in to see us and the planning goals that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And I think that the other piece of that, they don't have to feel bad spending their money, because if inheritance is a goal, and it depends on the person. I would say the most common answer we get when we ask, how important is leaving a legacy, inheritance? Do you have a specific goal for that? The common answer is they can take whatever's left, or they can sell the house. But there are some people out there that are very worried about inheritance and making sure that their kids are able to, get an inheritance from them, which I think is a beautiful thing as well. So for those people, it also frees them up a little bit to be able to feel like, hey, we want to do some things in retirement, but at the same time, we want to make sure our kids get money. And this way, if you die with $0 in your bank account, the kids are still going to get some money. Mm-hmm. So I think there is a freeing element to that for some people too. Mm-hmm. Again, I know there's going to be a lot of people listening that are like, I don't care, I'm spending all my money. And that's great for you. I have no...
We want you to.
Yeah. I have no opinion on whether or not you need to leave your kids money or not. That is completely up to you. Mm-hmm. But if it is a goal, we've just noticed with those types of people, they might be a little bit more apprehensive to spend their money on quote unquote, frivolous things, or doing some of the things they want to do just because they want to make sure they save up for their kids and have, that big inheritance at the end of life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want to get clear about if people have life insurance with their employer, okay, and then they're going into retirement, can they just keep that, Graham?
Generally, no.
Okay.
The normal answer in the private sector would be generally no. Mm-hmm. Nor would you usually want to keep it anyways. So I'll use the example of federal employees here for a minute, because they can actually keep it. But a lot of these group life, group term kind of policies that you get either A, expire after you're not employed anymore, or B, if they stay, they're usually kind of on a renewable term basis. So the federal government does this in 5-year increments. It may be different depending on your workplace. But what that means essentially is you may be 30 years old today, and let's say you work for Department of Defense or Department of War or U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, doesn't matter. And you're making, $75,000 a year, $60,000 a year, whatever. And you're carrying option B with your FEGLI, you're taking 5 times salary. You got like, what is that? $300,000 in term insurance. That's probably pretty cheap today through the government, through your workplace. Maybe you're paying, $10, $15 a pay period for that. Nothing crazy. But every 5 years, that's going to get a little bit more expensive and a little bit more expensive. And if you get fired at any point or laid off or riffed or whatnot, you're going to lose that insurance. And then when you go to retire in the federal side, you're going to have the option to keep it or not keep it. And outside of in the government, what they call the basic part of FEGLI, I don't know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, unless somebody knows that they, have a terminal illness. I've never met anybody who's kept their work insurance through the government into retirement.
No, I've done it once because of what you just mentioned.
Yeah, because of a terminal illness, you can't get outside insurance. That's kind of a totally different conversation. But if you're healthy and you're retiring, you would not keep it.
It's actually happened twice. Once with the federal government, and there was we can't say the name on the air, but you know who I'm talking about, out of our Nashville office. She was able to keep it in the private sector. So it was kind of one of those rare cases. So in that case, we just told them to keep it, but you don't always know that. So obviously when you're getting ready to retire, we always advocate for going to the doctor, make sure you get a physical and all that, because there are certain cases where you can keep it. And if it's terminal, terminal usually means 1 year or less before passing. It would make sense to keep it and pay for it. But it doesn't happen too terribly often. And I'll tell you, just from the federal government perspective, they're not really in the life insurance business. And if you want to hang on to their life insurance, you're going to pay for it. And so if someone is willing to want to hang on to it, it's usually better to just go get your own outside. And you should know that actually before the day of the retirement package being filled out. Like you should know 10 years ahead of time if you're going to need life insurance into retirement. And then that way you can make some planning, because we all know that life insurance, if you're needing it for coverage to cover some sort of a risk, it's a lot cheaper when you're younger. And so knowing that ahead of time is really, really important there.
Yeah, it is, to be able to set that up on the outside. And a lot of times, even if you're in your late 30s, early 40s, it's already going to be cheaper on the private side, the outside of work side than it is going to be. But I mean, from what I've seen, working with a lot of federal people specifically, but you see a very similar thing in the private sector if they can keep it. I mean, you're going to be paying at least double, if not 2.5 times more, to keep that same insurance than you would be able to get it for on the private side, because they want you off the books at that point.
Yeah.
They're not in the business of keeping people on in retirement. So long-winded answer, but sometimes you can. The bigger question is, should you, I think, though.
Yeah, I think it's, if you're a federal employee, listen to the show, and you're under the age of 50, you're going to be sticker shocked north of age 50, because the life insurance really starts to increase a lot there. But this is the other thing, because we've met with a lot of federal employees. Graham, I know you've heard this. They don't really realize how much they're paying because they never see it. They never look at their LES. And it isn't until we meet with them, we request a copy, do they then start kind of almost looking at the itemized list of things that come out of their paycheck every week. And they're like, holy cow, we're paying this much. And it's an eye opener. So I think, if you're listening to the show, it's worth looking, especially for a federal employee, worth looking at policies that are on the outside. Same thing in the private sector. You're going to get a certain amount probably for free, and then you can buy the rest of it. Over time, it's just going to get more expensive. So it's just better to go ahead and just buy your own early on. And I know we're getting near the end of the first half of the show, and this sounds like a big show to sell life insurance. And I promise it's really not. We do very little life insurance at the office unless it's requested or we feel like somebody needs it. But if you go back and really tune in to what we've said here, there are some very relevant points for some of the listeners out there, especially the federal government side and the private sector side. So don't just tune it out. Let's, kind of think about things with an open mind. And I think in the second half of the show, we're going to get a little bit more into long-term care. So that is something that's near and dear. I'll share a story here in a little bit. But if you're catching the show on the way to church, you can hop out to Apple Podcasts or the Spotify platforms, catch the whole show in its entirety. Again, we're going to start up on some long-term care here in just a few minutes. Hope you're having a great week. 256-937-2010. 256-937-2010. Give us a call to set up your discovery session.
Dreaming up your ideal retirement? It starts with a solid plan tailored to your unique goals. Set aside uncertainty by arranging a friendly, informative session with Cris Wallace. Just text VISIT to 256-937-2010. That's text VISIT to 256-937-2010. Begin charting your course with confidence.
Are you a federal employee feeling pressure from the early retirement offers like VERA, VSIP, or the Deferred Resignation Program? Recent government initiatives have introduced significant changes to federal retirement programs, making employees feel pressured to consider early retirement or face potential layoffs. At WG Financial Group, we help guide federal employees through these uncertain times. Our team understands the complex federal retirement systems and can help you make informed decisions. Call 256-937-2010 to schedule your complimentary discovery session with us today. We'll help you assess your options and create a personalized retirement plan to help you feel more confident. Visit WGFinancialGroup.com or call 256-937-2010 to book your session. Firm is not affiliated with the U.S. government. Investment advisory services offered through AE Wealth Management, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor.
Would you rather pay more or less in taxes? If you want to pay more, don't do anything. If you want to pay less, talk to Cris Wallace to see what's possible for you. Just text VISIT to 256-937-2010. Again, text VISIT to 256-937-2010.
Text the word visit if you prefer texting. It's that simple to get on their calendar. Remember, you can check us out online at WGFinancialGroup.com and on Facebook too throughout the week, WG Financial Group 256. The show's also available on podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So just search for the name of our show, The Rite Retirement Show. So happy to have you with us. I'm Luann Fulmer here with Cris Wallace and Graham Bauer. So we're talking today about protecting what you have built from life's risks. Okay. So let's really dig into long-term care. What are we actually talking about when we say long-term care? And then why should someone in retirement care about it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Luann. Great question. So first thing, I think there's a little bit of confusion with some people when I ask, do you have long-term care in a meeting? And they'll say, oh yeah, I have it. And what they're thinking of is they have long-term disability through their job. So that is if they go out on disability and they're out for an extended period of time, that's long-term disability. When we talk about long-term care, just to put it in perspective, it's nursing home insurance is basically a kind of a crude way to say it, essentially. But it's to pay for in-home care or assisted living or skilled nursing facility based on how the policy is actually structured. So I will tell you a little bit of a story here. My mother is actually transitioning into a home currently. Oh. And it's difficult. It's
sorry.
Yeah, because the type of care is needed is round the clock. Okay. And it's just not something that, it's just hard to do while you're working and stuff like that. So I've been very involved in this and a couple things. So she's in the state of Georgia. So Medicaid and that kind of stuff is ran at the state level, but I'll kind of tell you what, Georgia, we had to do it to Georgia. So she had to get admitted to the hospital. So that's the first thing. They have to, get admitted to the hospital, and then they have to do what's called a 3 midnight stay. And so basically they have to have 3 overnight stays after they've been admitted. And then they can be transferred out to a rehab facility. And my mom actually has what's called a Medicare supplement. And so the Medicare supplement will pay anything between, basically it'll pay up to 100 days of rehab type care. But this is typically how it happens. And actually, when I talked to the administrative person at the nursing home rehab facility that she's at currently, they were trying to, basically walk me through it. And I said, hey guys, I understand what's going on here. And I know that there'll be a point where she's no longer improving and then it'll transition to Medicaid. And they were shocked that I knew all of that. Yeah. And I said, well, I'm in the industry. Like I'm a CFP and I know how this works. So essentially what will happen is in a case like this, first thing, long-term care kind of starts in the home and then transitions to sometimes rehab facilities. And then when Medicare will continue to pay as long as the patient is improving and there's meaningful improvement there. And, the doctors and the PTs are coding it as such. But when the patient stops, improving or progressing, then what happens at that point, Medicare no longer pays. And you have 2 choices. You're either going to be private pay or you're going to transition into Medicaid. So we'll go through that process probably coming up in the next 15 to 20 days or somewhere around that time frame. And then at that point, the way it is in Georgia, it's different in Ohio. Actually, Jennifer's mother also is in a nursing home. So we have both of our parents in a nursing home right now. So it's a very emotional time, at the house, because you're watching your parents just go downhill.
Yeah,
and it's
it's
tough.
awful.
It's really, really tough to watch that. But
sorry.
in Georgia, when you go on Medicaid, the Social Security that you have then goes to the nursing home, and the patient gets to keep $70. I think in Ohio, I think it's like 45. So the numbers are different. Again, it's based on state. And at that point, you basically, you're in there at that point.
Yep.
And, but that's what long-term care insurance is for. And the reason we wanted to talk about it, I text Graham this morning. I said, hey, let's talk about long-term care, is because both myself and Jennifer are like living it right now.
Yep.
And it's hard on the kids. Let's just say that. And I'm not asking for a pity party. That's not at all what the reason I want to talk about this. But it's hard. It's a heavy weight on myself. It's a heavy weight on Jen. There's a lot of big decisions that have to be made. And unfortunately, neither one of our parents had long-term care insurance.
Right.
So I was asking the nursing home that in the future, if I wanted to transition, I have two brothers in Georgia, so I don't want to yank mom out of Georgia, because then she's further away from them.
Right.
But in talking about the transition, I would have to pay out of pocket, which I'm willing to do, if she were to transition across state lines while she transitions into Tennessee nursing home or Medicaid.
Okay.
And the cost of that was nearly $12,000 for the month.
Wow. A month.
Yeah, for the month.
Wow.
So you're, again, willing to do that, not an issue to do that, to transition. But the reason I bring that up is it's expensive. Like, it's expensive. So if you have a spouse and they go into a nursing home and the plan is to private pay, then, I mean, you're looking at somewhere easily between 8 and 12, because I quoted 12 because that's what they told me that for a private room, because you have shared rooms, you have private rooms. Private rooms are more expensive. And so a private room was like 12 grand a month. So it's not cheap. So when we talk about this long-term care today, it's near and dear to me because I'm dealing with it. Jen's dealing with it. And it's something that we feel like families should take seriously. I hear a lot of men say, well, I'm not going in a nursing home.
How do you know?
Well, you don't.
Yeah.
And by the time you know you need it, you're already crazy and don't really know you're crazy. Everybody else around you knows you're crazy, but you don't know you're crazy. But I've had men say, I'm not going in there. I'm just, what'll happen. I ain't going in there. And they'll just kind of look at me. And I know what they're implying they'll do, but I'm thinking you won't know to do that because you're crazy and your wife knows you're crazy and we see it, but you don't know it. So it's definitely part of the planning process. And so, like I said, I wanted to make sure we brought that up today and talked about it.
Well, and I think, I have not had the experience of obviously parents needing that, but with grandparents, 3 of my 4 grandparents that have passed away have all needed varying levels of long-term care for, varying amounts of times. But I think the thing I've noticed is once somebody goes through the situation of taking care of a parent, when they go have a long-term care event, especially an extended one, it makes them a lot more, I guess, sympathetic maybe is the right word, to not wanting their kids to have to do the same for them, because it's one of those things that I think just until you've experienced it, you don't really know how difficult it is. Because most people are not nurses by trade, they're not medical professionals. And so even if you're expecting your kids to help take care of you, which a lot of kids do, and I think that's a beautiful thing, they're still not likely going to be able to do that completely on their own. I mean, they're not going to probably be able to administer shots to you and do all of the things that need to be done a lot of times by a nurse or, some medical professional. So even if that is your plan that, the kids have said they'll take care of me, for one, I would sort of, I guess, challenge you to say, have you had to go through the experience of taking care of a parent before in that scenario? And how was that experience for you? And then 2, even if they do that, are they going to be able to do all of it? Or, in the scenarios with two of my three grandparents, they were mostly with my parents or with, aunts and uncles, but there was still home health care taking place basically every day. It wasn't a situation where, the kids were able to do everything. They still had to hire out home health care, which that might be obviously cheaper than being in a facility all the time, but it's not cheap.
No.
It's still expensive.
3 to 5 a month.
Yeah. So there's some cost savings there. But again, now you're you've got to make sure your kids have space for you, that they're in a geographically advantageous location for you to be in, and that you can still afford that amount too. So I think there's a lot of things to think about. And like I said, I mean, the people who, because that's a question when you come in for a discovery session and we sit down and we go through our whole sheet, one of the questions is about long-term care. And a lot of times we'll just ask, is that a concern? Is long-term care a concern for you? And I would say 9 out of 10 times when somebody is saying, yes, that's a big concern, it is because they will also go into a story of, oh, my dad had dementia. He was alive for 15 years. We had to take care of him part-time. It was so difficult. We don't want our kids to have to do the same thing.
Yeah. The other thing too, just personal experience, dealing with this. So mom has an early onset diagnosis, dementia, and one of the things you may not be prepared for is they become very agitated very, very quickly because it's one of the things you don't want to do. You don't want to argue with someone who has dementia. You just kind of go along with it essentially, because the minute you start challenging their memory of something, even though it's a lack of memory in a lot of cases, they become agitated because they realize that they can't remember. And it's just be prepared for that can happen. And sometimes they say things that you can't believe they said. I distinctly remember my grandmother saying things at the dinner table when she lived with us part-time before she went into a nursing home. And here recently, just some of the things my mom has said is like, whoa, wow. It's kind of shocking to say the least. And all over the spectrum, angry, stuff that I couldn't say on the air. Compliance will cut it out, obviously. But just be prepared that, when that starts to happen, it's not just the mobility, it's the mind too. And the mind will cause them, to have behaviors that you may not quite be ready for. And Graham, I like your point. I'm actually glad you kind of spoke up there because you brought some good points that I think at the end of the day, and we've done a lot for mom. I mean, because you work with me and you hear the stuff. But there comes a point like where my mom today needs care 24/7, and that's just not something that I can do, or a family member can do at this point. They need skills. She needs skilled care at this point. But to your point, sometimes there's kind of that hybrid thing going on where you have home health care come in for a little bit of the work, and the kids are doing a little bit, and that's fine and well. And we kind of went through that phase, and when you look at the progression of long-term care in general, it typically starts in the home with the spouses kind of helping each other out. Now, mom is divorced, my mom, so she lived alone. So, we would do some things for her, have some people come in to help her out, that sort of thing. And that's kind of where long-term care starts. And then typically it progresses more to kind of an assisted living type of a situation, and then on to full-blown skilled care. And that's kind of where my mom is at this point. But that's kind of the path of long-term care. Nobody wants to stay or live in a nursing home. They're not great. And I've been in enough of them now to know that myself. But sometimes that's how things ultimately progress. And I did have one of my clients tell me the other day, he just was talking to me and he just said, I just don't want you to bear the burden of this, Chris. And I thought that was really nice of him to say. Like he's a great client of mine. And he just kind of said, hey, I want you to know, and he's in the medical field as well, that, don't bear the burden of this emotionally. This is not your fault, and you're doing the best that you can. So anyway, that's a little bit about my situation. And that's why we wanted to kind of go into this long-term care today and just ask people again, think about it. Don't be closed-minded about it. Of course, we sell it, so I want to be full disclosure there. Like we do sell long-term care, but here again, we have a lot of people that really don't think it's going to be a big deal, but the statistics out there say that 70% of us are going to need it at some point in our life, some level of care. And I talked about the progression of that. And then also 20% of those people are going to need it for more than 5 years. So my mom actually would fall into that category. If you take a look at kind of where she started needing a little bit more help to where she is today, it's more than 5 years. So 20% of people are going to need it for more than 5 years. So I'm sure you've got other questions, Luann. I know we put notes together, but I don't usually review the notes ahead of time. This
That's
stuff
okay.
is off the dome,
Yeah.
off the brain for me a lot of
That's
times.
okay.
So, but yeah, let's keep rolling.
Well, and I want to just say that I have been through this with my parents and my husband's mother and his mother. Same thing. My mom was in a nursing home. My dad realized, oh dear, this is costing a lot of money. Then he took out nursing home insurance. He ended up using it. And then my mother-in-law ended up having to go on Medicare because she did private pay for about 9 months, and then she was out of money, and then she had to go on Medicare. So I've seen it all, and now my sister has dementia too, just like your mother. So I'm kind of right in the middle of that too. And so I hate to see what you guys are going through, because I get it. I understand. I've been there, and it's hard. It's a hard part of life. It really is. Hard part of life. So I'm very sorry that you're having to go through this. I guess I want to get into, Medicare. People think Medicare is going to cover long-term care, but it does not. So talk about what it does cover, maybe what it does and doesn't cover.
Yeah. So what I was saying earlier, just kind of condense that whole section that I just kind of talked about there. So Medicare, one of the attorneys I worked with years ago said Medicare only cares while you have money. And
I believe it.
It's kind of true, actually.
Yeah, and then it becomes Medicaid. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So Medicare is your medical side of insurance, so your hospital stays, your doctor's visits, short-term rehabilitation. So Medicare will pay for all of that, and depending on if you have a supplement, Medicare supplement like a G or an N plan, it'll pay for up to 100 days. But I've talked to enough nurses through this process with mom and the care and the rehabs and all the things she's been through. Typically, I think one of the nurses told me they've only seen Medicare pay up to like 45 days, because what happens is, like I said a few minutes ago, when the patient stops progressing, and through the rehab process, and they've kind of plateaued and they're not going to get any better, and they're probably not coming out of the nursing home, Medicare stops paying, and then it's a transition to Medicaid if you don't have any assets. If you have assets, well, then you're going to spend them down at that point. You're either going to exit the nursing home or you're going to stay in the nursing home, and you're going to use your assets to pay for care. So Medicare covers, like I said, hospitals, doctors, rehabilitation, but when you stop progressing and rehabbing in a positive way, then Medicaid kicks in, and Medicaid does cover the long-term care aspect of it. So you can be in one of those nursing homes if they accept Medicaid patients.
Right.
And also, I'll say this as well, Medicaid hospitals, they're a little different than private pay hospitals.
They sure are.
Care
I saw
facilities.
the difference. I saw the difference.
So, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. And those of you who have dealt with this type will know exactly what I'm talking about. So that's really the difference in Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare, like I said, is going to pay for some. And then when it's like truly a long-term care situation, that's when you either have private pay, you either have long-term care insurance, or you transition to Medicaid.
Okay. So for someone, let's say, who is saved well, they have a pension, okay? Is self-insuring for long-term care ever a reasonable strategy?
I think it definitely can be. And it just really depends on, one, obviously how much you've saved, your pension income, all of that, but also just your goals for inheritance and how that relates to how worried you are about long-term care. To give an example of this, so, if you're somebody who maybe has a small pension, you got some money saved, but you're very worried about long-term care and inheritance, and you maybe have a family history of dementia or something like that, it's probably not a bad idea to even still look into something outside of what you have, because even if you have the ability to self-insure, there's no guarantee you're not going to run through most or all of your assets in the process of self-insuring. So, for some of our larger clients, they won't take out any type of long-term care because they assume they can self-insure, and they probably can, and they can still leave behind an inheritance. But then some still do, because even outside of all of that, they're also maybe a little concerned about the level of care that they're going to be receiving, because the more you run down your assets, if you get to the point of Medicaid eligibility, like Cris mentioned a minute ago, usually your standard of care is probably going to drop a little bit if you're not going self-pay anymore, or at least your options are going to drop, because you're not just going to be able to choose whatever facility you want at, whatever cost you can afford at that point. So it is a viable strategy. And there are definitely people that we tell, for example, you come into the office, you're 68 years old, you have a couple million saved. Those people are probably not going to look into long-term care insurance if they haven't yet, because they're at the age where it's going to be so ridiculously expensive that it's probably not even worth it. And they probably have the ability to self-insure, but we would still want to make them aware of, if you do go the self-insurance route, just understand that with a married couple, if you have 2 million saved, if you both have a long-term care event, 4 or 5 years each, you could run through half of that with that amount. And so if you're okay with that and you're, hey, that's still plenty of money to leave the kids, then that's great. Maybe you don't need it. But I think everybody should be looking into it at some point in life. It just, sometimes you kind of miss the boat on it for price reasons, and even for, qualifying to get it, because you still have to qualify on health. Yeah. If you're going into a facility tomorrow, they're not going to give you the policy. So
no, that's right. Average care length of time for women is about 3.7 years. For men, it's about 2.2.
Gosh.
So just multiply, just easy numbers, do 10 grand a month. That's 120 a year in care. So as Graham mentioned, it's a nest egg ripper in terms of potentially ripping up a nest egg.
Yeah, that's $600,000 over 5 years.
Yeah, if
one of you has a 2-year stay, the other has a 3-year stay,
yeah,
that's $600,000, and you still have your Social Security and your pension. Some of that'll go towards that as well.
Correct.
So it's not like you maybe need to cover that whole $600,000, but if you want to make sure you can get good care and you're don't want to run through a big part of your nest egg, that it's going to be more of a consideration, even if you have saved pretty well.
Yeah, it's just, and I think we can kind of get into this now, but there's a lot of products that are available that we think are helpful to clients today. And I think the first thing you have to think about with long-term care, like as you mentioned, you got to qualify for it, Graham. And it used to, so I've been doing this a long time, back in the very, very beginnings of Cris Wallace entering the insurance industry years and years ago, it was like a 1 to 2 page app, and you pretty much filled it out and you were going to get it. Well, nowadays there is, at least at bare minimum, a phone interview that has to occur with almost every carrier. So they want to check some things out. They want to pull your medical records and all of that. And it's a lot harder to get, is the point. And so I think when even the situation with my mom being 52, almost 53 years old at this point, it has really opened my eyes to, hey, maybe I do want to look at a policy for myself and Jen right now, because it's a lot cheaper today. It's cheaper today than it's ever going to be in terms of like the cost for the care policy. But the other thing when you're looking at these types of policies is you need to think of them about, in the way of like leverage. So how much money am I going to put in, and how much long-term care is that going to generate in the future? And typically you're wanting to see somewhere with these hybrid type products, you probably want to see somewhere 3 to 4 times leverage on your money. And I think if you see that, that's a pretty good leverage that you're getting on your money for care. Some people say, well, I'll just put money in a side account and, that'll be my long-term care bucket. And that's fine if you don't need care sooner than later. If it's a lot later, then that money has time to grow. But if you need it in the near term, it's kind of like the life insurance theory. Well, I'm not going to buy life insurance. I'm just going to save money. Well, what if you die the next day or the next month? You've got a month of savings at that point. Well, same thing with long-term care. Sometimes it's better just to buy the policy. And I think the great thing is about some of these hybrid policies that are out there is there's death benefits associated with them nowadays, because that is one of the most frustrating things to people. I think there's 2 frustrating things that I can think of that I've heard a lot in the time that I've been doing this. Number one is, it'll go something like this. Cris, my mom had this policy and it would not pay for in-home care. Like you had to be in a nursing home for it to pay, and it wouldn't pay for in-home care. So that's frustrating to know. And then what that does is that locks in this psychological anchor inside of the adult child's head to where long-term care is bad because it wouldn't pay my mom's care. And in reality, it was just that policy wasn't an all-encompassing policy. The policies nowadays pay for in-home, they pay for nursing home. It's really driven off ADLs, which is activities of daily living.
Yep.
And so I hear that. And then the other thing is, well, Cris, my parents had this long-term care policy and they paid on that thing for 35 years. And you know what? They never used it. And the insurance company kept everything. So the policies that exist today on what we will call the hybrid chassis is they pay for in-home care. Again, it's all based off ADLs. If you can't do 2 out of 6 ADLs, then the policy will start paying. And then if you don't use it, like the second example I gave, then there's a death benefit that is associated with a policy that pays out to your beneficiaries. So you have it. If you need it, you got it. And if you had it and didn't use it, then somebody gets the money in the form of a death benefit. Yeah. I think the earlier you can look at this, probably the better. So again, if it's something that you've had to deal with or you're going to want to deal with in the future, I think it's better to start looking at it around your mid-50s because of the cost. Because basically, once you hit a certain age, sometimes it's the early 70s, the insurance companies aren't going to insure you at that point. They're going to say you're too old at that point, because at that point, they know they're much closer to needing to pay out the policy, so they won't even insure you. Mm-hmm. So if you think that you're going to need this or want to go through with something like this, it's better to start looking at it on the earlier side.
All right. Well, guys, as we start to wrap up, I'm going to ask this. If someone has done zero planning around long-term care and life insurance, they don't have any, and they're in their 60s right now, what's the most important thing they can do?
Well, hopefully they've done the other parts of their planning, because in your question, you said just life insurance and long-term care. So I think really what we have to think about here is if you're in your 60s and you've done zero looking at this, I think you need to have someone evaluate your situation to see if your retirement plan can support an early death or maybe even an early long-term care event. Because if you have long-term care in your latter 60s, which is becoming more and more common for people to have dementia episodes early on. And we can have conversations on why that is, the food, the environment, all the things. But the reality is some of the statistics are trending lower. Can your plan support that? So I would say, first, have you sat down with a qualified, certified financial planner, gone through your retirement plan, and is your plan okay? And then what if we have these types of things happen? So really going and finding that trusted person or trusted firm to go sit down with to give an honest assessment of the situation. And then I would say do it sooner than later, because in your question, I think you said they're in their 60s. So things start to get a little bit more pricey when you get in your 60s. And then, like I said a few minutes ago, you get up into the 70s, a lot of insurance companies won't even touch you at that point. So we do this at the office. We would be happy to talk to you about what the options are, run through those, provide some illustrations for you to take a look at, and really educate your family on what options exist today, pros and cons of each, the cost of each, et cetera, all of that. We do that in what we call a discovery session. And you could start that by calling 256-937-2010. Again, the number is 256-937-2010. I hope everybody has an awesome and blessed weekend. And remember to serve every person in every situation with a servant heart.
Please remember, converting an employer plan account to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. An increase in taxable income from the Roth IRA conversion may have several consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA.
Graham Bauer holds the enrolled agent designation, but is not currently offering tax preparation services. Neither the firm nor its agents may give tax advice. Individuals should consult with a qualified professional for guidance before making any purchasing decisions.
Investment advisory services made available through AE Wealth Management LLC, AEWM. AEWM and WG Financial Group are not affiliated companies. Insurance products are offered through the insurance business WG Insurance Services. WG Financial Group is an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through AE Wealth Management LLC, AEWM, a registered investment advisor. AEWM does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by WG Insurance Services are not subject to investment advisory requirements. AEWM and WG Financial Group are not affiliated companies. companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. WG Financial is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by WG Financial. This radio show is a paid placement.